Hello, I'm Bobby Savoy, AARP Louisiana State President. I'm an AARP volunteer and also the volunteer lead for both the Speakers Bureau and the Fraud Watch Network for the Louisiana State Office. Today I'm back with Amanda Gallina, Community Engagement Manager for SBP. And thank you, Amanda, for joining me again today. We spoke earlier about SBP and a few recommendations that we can take to be prepared for a hurricane. And now we all know that things have been busy since our last conversation. Hurricane Marco came and went. Hurricane Laura made landfall as an extremely powerful Category 4 hurricane in southwest Louisiana, ripping apart portions of Louisiana and far eastern Texas, even continuing into North Louisiana and beyond. Our hearts go out to those who were impacted and to the families of those who lost loved ones. Now that the hurricane has passed, I'd like to talk about some steps that can be taken to begin the recovery process. SBP has a wealth of information that has been developed as a result of 15 years of experience following Hurricanes Katrina and Rita in 2005. Also know that SBP shares this information with those who have been impacted by disasters in order to help in rebuilding and transitioning back to some kind of normalcy. AARP also has information that is available, particularly with respect to helping the age 50 plus protect themselves from fraud and scam, as well as tips on rebuilding. So if we could, let's talk about a few things where our viewers can benefit from SBP's experience. And Amanda, I guess if we could start maybe with post-disaster insurance.
Yeah, absolutely, Bobby. Similar to AARP, SBP wants you to know that our thoughts are with everyone impacted by Hurricane Laura, and that at SBP we are marshaling resources and doing damage assessments in Texas and Louisiana. Ultimately, Bobby, we wish these conversations never were needed, that recovery component. But for anyone that has experienced Laura or a future disaster event, we know that these tips can make navigating disaster recovery easier. And ultimately, Bobby, we just want folks to have the quickest recovery possible. So post-disaster insurance. What we want you to know, and you probably are aware of, that there are several major funding sources for immediate financial assistance after disasters. So we have insurance, FEMA grants, and SBA loans. Immediately after disasters, many people depend on their homeowners insurance to help restore homes and lives to normal. So we have some tips when dealing with homeowners insurance and filing claims. We want you to be detailed, be proactive, and be persistent. Before we go into what that looks like, it is important for folks to know that homeowners insurance is separate and distinct from flood insurance. That's why, Bobby, on our first call, we always recommend that folks consider purchasing flood insurance. Homeowner policies provide coverage and damage for sort of wind and wind-driven rain. And we saw that a lot with Laura. So a lot of folks hopefully have that coverage. But homeowners insurance often excludes floods and earthquakes. So again, want people to consider that, especially with more storms coming in the Gulf, even after Hurricane Laura has come and gone. So we want folks to know that you're really your only advocate. Our clients in the past sort of stopped short in various parts of the process because they met a roadblock. And we want you to know that you can kind of push past those. Work closely with your insurance agent to ensure that all of your damage is included. We know that agencies sort of view assistance process as ongoing negotiation. So think of it that way. Make sure you include a home inventory of photos, receipts, and other records of valuables of how they were damaged and destroyed. And just know that if and when a federal disaster declaration includes individual assistance, FEMA and SBA cannot know what your unmet needs are unless you tell them. So include it all and see sort of what happens. Also stay in regular communication with your agent and ask about progress for your application, and just continue to sort of advocate for yourself. We want you to document everything. The communication you have back and forth, keep track of it. Sometimes things get lost in the shuffle. And finally, when it comes to it, homeowners insurance and other insurance as well, appeal if you disagree. If you believe the amount suggested by the insurance claim adjuster is too low or does not include all of your damage, you can appeal, and you should appeal. Sometimes you'll need extra documentation, etc., but that is really the best way to get the most out of those claims. Advocate for yourself, appeal if you disagree, and sort of push on.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. The Governor Edwards said yesterday, and many times, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And several key things that you said is be persistent, file appeals, keep in touch with your insurance agent, with your adjuster. Those are all important things to do. I mean, it's unfortunate. We're in a state of emotional distress. Patience is the key. It's going to take some time. The rebuilding process. Look at all of those things that have happened in the past. They've all, optimistically, maybe you can rebuild in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Faster than that, it's probably not the norm. 6 months, that's very optimistic. So patience and persistence. And what about FEMA? Navigating FEMA can be an obstacle as well.
Yes, and it's so true, Bobby. Everything you're saying is really about this idea that it is that long-term recovery. We want to shrink it down, but it is pretty lengthy, and we'll get it as most efficient as we can with these tips. But that challenging piece definitely comes into play with navigating FEMA. So it's important to know that FEMA's individual and household program has to be approved as a part of a disaster declaration. So we know that there are disaster declarations in Texas and Louisiana and Arkansas, but we don't know yet if that individual assistance program has been approved. But it doesn't mean we can't tell you what to do as soon as it is. And so what we want you to know is you have to apply to FEMA. But many of our clients have said that when they applied, they were first sent to SBA. So SBA stands for Small Business Administration, but it is there for folks after a disaster. And FEMA really says, consider this first. So you're going to have to provide some information to SBA. The other thing many of our clients did not know is if you qualify for SBA, you cannot get any further FEMA money unless you take that SBA loan. So we sort of want folks to kind of know what that process flow looks like. If you don't qualify for the SBA loan, do not give up. Reapply to FEMA and advocate so that you get the dollars you deserve. And so that's kind of the best practices we've learned. People think that they've applied to the SBA loan and they get denied, that that's where they should stop, and it's not. Go back to FEMA. Don't be confused when they send you to SBA. It gets a little tricky there, but you can continue to sort of reapply and ask sort of why there was a denial, et cetera. It will really help you maximize that federal award.
Yeah, and people, again, are distressed after one of these disasters. And so not knowing the process is the biggest obstacle. Once you know the process, then it's a matter of, checking off the boxes and submitting the information, making sure the information gets to where it needs to be. And that was one of the challenges that we always face is we provide the people that, the impacted homeowners provide the information, and then it never gets delivered to the final source. And so you just got to keep asking the question, and then sometimes you got to submit multiple pieces of the same information, and that is so frustrating. Mm-hmm. And so the rebuilding process it's going to involve bringing in contractors. Maybe you have your own contractor. Maybe your contractor is tied up. There are going to be thousands of people who want the same thing. They're going to need a contractor. They're going to need building supplies all at the same time. And when you have thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of people going to a few sources, that also begins to be an obstacle. And so we have sometimes these contractors coming in from other states and maybe other municipalities. And so what do we need to be looking for when we turn to contractors?
Yeah, great question, Bobby. This is one of the most heartbreaking components of recovery in past storms, where you see someone get an insurance claim, someone that really truly needs that money to recover, and then has a contractor walk away from it. And so not all contractors are like that, but we want people to know it is more common than you think. that contractor fraud occurs. And so we can protect ourselves by doing some simple steps. And so SBP recommends you should really only hire experienced contractors. Like you said, Bobby, maybe you trust somebody, but they're not available or backed up. So if you're going to partner with someone new, always ask for references. We also suggest that when you're working with them, you insist on written bids and estimates. So things you can sort of keep record of, go back to and reference. We want you to know you should always read your contract and ask any questions you might have. And then finally, to really ensure that heartbreaking piece doesn't exist, do not pay in full or upfront. Really pay in those increments so that you can ensure that work gets done.
Yeah, I think legitimate contractors don't necessarily require a lot of upfront payment, and if a contractor does, just be aware, be wary of that, and certainly make sure that that contractor is licensed. Louisiana has a licensing contractor. A licensing board for contractors. I'm sure many other states have that. It's a simple phone call or an email to find out whether that your potential contractor is on that list. And we see so many times, so often after a disaster where contractors come in and take advantage of people and take money up front, don't do the work, drag their feet very slow. So, we just need to be, there are legitimate contractors out there. And we as homeowners who've been impacted need to just make sure that we get the best that we can.
Absolutely.
And so, sort of in that same area of contracting and rebuilding is the issue of mold. How to understand how to get rid of mold, and I know SBP has done a lot of work in that area. And how can we make people aware of issues related to mold in rebuilding?
Sure. So when we see a flooding event, that is the first thing that becomes the problem, is mold. Mold loves that warm, sort of wet environment. And so very quickly after a storm, people start experiencing issues with mold. And the other thing is, when you're partnering with a contractor, there's lots of stuff you're going to need their assistance in, but SVP believes you can take care of mold on your own, but we need to clarify some things. Number one, you absolutely have to have mold remediated or cleared up before any other rebuilding can happen. So if you're rebuilding on top of the inside of your home that is having a mold issue, that's going to persist. But we can save money and save that money to do other stuff by remediating that mold ourselves. So the first thing that we always want to myth bust is there's definitely a difference between mold and mildew. So mildew is sort of gray and white and lives on the surface, and you can wipe that away. And so we see people go into the store after storms or having it in their house and using that bleach and just bleaching everything. And we understand that makes, especially in times of COVID, right? Like, get it out. But when it comes to mold, it doesn't just live on the surface. It's not gray and white, it's more of green and black, and it can grow into things with sort of these roots and branches. And so not only is it going into the surfaces, it's sort of spreading through the air. So bleach will not remove mold. You will actually need a proper fungicide. And you can actually go and purchase those. So just make sure that we're not trying to use bleach to clean mold. Many of our clients experience really bad sort of reactions to mold, so you'll know it when it's present. If you have someone elderly or someone in your home that's immunocompromised, this becomes a very big issue. They're sneezing and runny nose and itchy eyes, asthma attacks, fever, infection. So you want to take care of this. Getting rid of it is essential to your family's health and also really getting you along in your recovery. So in order to sort of remediate mold, you want to stop the source of water. So we can't have it continue to be wet. You can do some mucking and gutting, but you want to dry it out. That's going to kill the existing mold. And then below the surface, we can sort of address what's going on by cleaning with that fungicide and sort of remediating. There are steps on sbpprotects.org specifically on how to clean and remediate. But once you do that, you'll have removed the dead mold, and that dead spore sort of won't be present. You won't have that allergic reaction, and then you just continue to allow the area to dry. Once that whole cycle has happened, you can move on with the rebuilding process. But I definitely encourage people to visit our website. There's great videos on the tools you will need and step-by-step guides if you decide to mold remediate on your own.
Yeah, mold is a big issue, especially from the health perspective, and it's important to do it right, because if you don't and you rebuild and you enclose it and you have that mold, you know, behind your walls
Mm-hmm.
and in the frame, and
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a real issue that is much more difficult to take care of.
Absolutely.
So, Amanda, another great conversation. I know that we have these tips just so helpful to our viewers, our members, and the age 50 plus.
Mm-hmm.
I know that SBP has many more suggestions and information that certainly can be helpful to our viewers. So again, it's been great talking with you. And if someone has questions or would like to get more information, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, same as last time. Please reach out. You can contact me at agallina@sbpusa.org. There's my telephone number there. And of course, our website with all of the resources mentioned in today's discussion, sbpprotects.org.
Great, thank you. So, we've talked a few things. We've hit some highlights. I know there's much more. I know that SBP has information on the website. AARP has information on our website, and for us particularly about frauds and scams, but we also have links to, other rebuilding. So any final thoughts or words for our viewers?
I just appreciate you spending the time talking with me today. I think you hit the nail on the head. This is really hard work. People are just beginning this, and it's going to be a long road, and the recovery process can seem daunting. So we're there for you. We understand it. You're not alone. But the key is not to give up. You've got to keep fighting for yourself and for your own recovery. Nobody's just going to kind of assist you very easily. You've got to fight for it, and you deserve it. Everything should be prompt, efficient, and predictable. That's what SBP believes. And also just take care of yourself. We know it's stressful in times of COVID already. And so self-care is super important, making sure your family is safe and dealing with that stress, getting plenty of sleep, etc.
Yeah, just stressful times. And when you're in the midst of it, you don't feel the stress until you have an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to reflect on it. But, patience, and I know patience is very difficult when you've lost so much, and especially these people in Southwest and Western Louisiana who've lost their homes and their businesses and so much of what they own. So it's patience and it's persistence and knowing what steps to take, what are the next steps. So on behalf of AARP Louisiana, I want to thank you, Amanda and SBP, for joining us today to discuss these timely tips and suggestions. And to our viewers, I want to encourage you to stay safe, follow the directions from your local authorities, avoid floodwaters, and remember, we're still dealing with COVID-19, which means wear your mask, wash your hands often, and keep your distance if you can. For updates from the governor's office, text LAGOV to 67283. And remember, you can call 211 for information and referral sources before, during, and after a storm. If you're in need of a shelter, text LA Shelter to 898-211. For additional tips and resources, you can visit our website at aarp.org.la. And we thank you for viewing, and have a good day. And remember, patience and persistence.